So is the PPT visible, sir?
Yes, ma'am. It is
Yes, yes.
visible, ma'am.
Yes, sir. Shall I start, sir?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Okay.
Sure, sure.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Welcome all, dear participants, for this session 2 of today, legal aspects of a business. So I would remind you with some points. Certain participants were not visible with PPT yesterday. You please pin the name of SDPA, right? There will be two names, and in one name the presentation mode will be there. And if you pin it, right, the pin option will be there. If you pin, you could easily my PPT will be visible to you. So thank you all yesterday for your positive comments, and it makes me a betterment, right, to work more. Thank you all, dear participants. So we shall start today's session with legal aspects of business. So it's a very vast unit, which is to be nearly, it goes for a month or twice a month, right? Fully 30 or 60 days syllabus it is, but I will try to complete all the things in today's PPT. So we shall start. This is the contents. So all the act I have given here for your reference. So whenever you can open my PPT, you can make reference of the contents too. So here we start the Indian Contract Act 1872. So it is a contract. A contract is an exchange of promises by two or more persons. It is an agreement creating an obligation to do or to refrain from doing a particular act which is enforced by law. According to Section 2 of H of the Act, the term contract is defined as an agreement enforceable by law. Here, I have given certain text in bold because they frequently ask the sections, right, in MCQs. 2 of H. So the agreement, the term contract is defined in which section, and the definition of the contract, and what are the essential elements, etc. So this PPT itself, each slide proves to be a single MCQ or 2 to 3 questions you can understand like that. So the contract consists of two essential elements: an agreement, enforceability by law. Only those agreements which are enforceable by law are contracts. The term agreement given in section 2 of E. So 2 of H gives you contract, and 2 of E defines agreement. 2 of E of the Act is defined as every promise and every set of promises forming the consideration for each other. So little 2 to 3 questions you can expect from here: define agreement, the sections, and what are the two essential elements, etc. Here goes the essential elements of a valid contract: proper offer and acceptance to create legal relationship, lawful consideration and lawful object, capacity to contract, free consent, no void or illegal agreements, certainty of meaning, possibility of performance of an agreement, necessary legal formalities. So we could have seen all these things if you are students, you will be learning it in your company law paper, and very often these things we come across. So offer and acceptance is nothing but A has to offer and B has to accept it. Lawful consideration, so something in terms of money must be exchanged between the two, right? The object, if it is an object, it must be lawful. Capacity to contract, everything it will come in detail. So a minor, when he enters into a contract, certain restrictions are there. When we enter into a contract with persons of unsound mind, it becomes void, and so on. So free consent is without any forgery, right? If any agreement is entered with forgery, we call it as the agreement or the contract is without free consent. So I will show you with so many examples in the slides coming ahead. No void or illegal agreement. So illegal agreement, so for any agreement put for any illegal products or illegal gambling, import of drugs, etc. Certainty of meaning. So the agreement or contract must have a certain meaning, not vague, right? So it shouldn't be non-understandable. It shouldn't be vague or confusing to the parties. Possibility of performance of an agreement. So whenever you put an agreement, A or B or A and B and C enter into it in order to perform it, right? So possibility of performance must be there. And the necessary legal formalities. Again, you can expect the MCQs, at least 1 to 2 questions. Mostly a single question appears here, essential elements of a valid contract. And next comes capacity of parties. So I myself have given MCQs are possible here. Section 11. So under which section capacity of parties is dealt with? They used to ask like that. So section 11, and who are all the persons eligible and who are the persons non-eligible. So here we go. Section 11 of the Indian Contract Act specifies that every person is competent to contract provided is of the age of major, who is of sound mind, is not disqualified from contracting by any law. So with these 3 keywords, we come to know that if these persons are competent to contract, so who are the persons who are not competent? So I have given it in the last line. In other words, a minor, a person of unsound mind, a person disqualified from contracting. Example I have given, an alien enemy, insolvents, and convicts, right, are not competent to contract. They may give, once they ask in the options, right? So we got minor, unsound mind, and disqualified, and some other thing. So you have to identify the odd man out. So here you can expect one multiple choice question. And next comes free consent. The consent of the parties must be genuine. It means parties to a contract must agree upon the same thing in the same sense. If A tells one thing, the same sense B has to understand. If both of them understands it in a different way, there is the absence of free consent. So there should be consensus ad idem, which means common understanding. Again, the consensus ad idem, always they used to ask, the exact meaning is common understanding. Consent is not free when it is vitiated by coercion, undue influence, fraud, misrepresentation, and mistake. So next slide will give you the definition of all these things. So when these factors are present, which the factors coercion, undue influence, fraud, misrepresentation, and mistake. If anything is present in your contract, it is not obtained by free consent. For example, if I tell A threatened to shoot B if B does not lend him rupees 5,000, and B is frightened and he agrees to it. So here I have given, it's an example of coercion. So next we'll move to very important definitions. So where all the persons who write the exam get confused with these definitions, they give the definition and they give the terms in the option. So when you are thorough with the definition, you can choose the correct option. So only mild differences, which I have given in black, right? It is given thick. So coercion, it is the committing or threatening to commit. If you see a word threatening, my dear participants, so if you see the word threatening to commit, it's nothing but coercion. Somebody is forcing you, right? So as we saw in the before slide. Undue influence, when one party to a contract is able to dominate the will of the other and uses the position to obtain an unfair advantage, right? So somebody else wants to take advantage of the situation. So that we call it as undue influence. Fraud. The third aspect is fraud. Fraud exists when a false representation has been made knowingly. So the very word, the important word is, we know that it is a fraud, what we commit is a fraud, but even though in a contract or agreement, it is made. So with an intention to deceive, which means to cheat the other party to induce him to enter into a contract. Next comes misrepresentation. It means a misstatement of a material fact made believing it to be true. Note down here, participants. So they believe it to be true. They don't know whether it is wrong, but they believe that it is true. Let me enter, right? So believing it to be true means misrepresentation without an intent to deceive the party. There is no chance, there is no intent, or they don't have any idea of cheating the other party. Mistake, when both the parties are at a mistake to a matter of fact to the agreement. So both of them commit some mistakes. So it may be in any form, right? So when they put in the agreement, typographical errors, so many things are there, right? So these factors are very, very important, and you get at least 1 to 2 questions. So frequently definitions are being given. The persons have to identify the exact meaning. Next comes discharge of contract, discharge by performance. So what do you mean by discharge of contract? So in some way, a contract has to come to an end, right? So it can't go for long and long and long. So it has to come to an end at a particular point of time. So when the contract ends, we call it as discharge of contract, and it may take in any ways, right? So I have given what are all the ways the contract is to be discharged and what are their appropriate meanings. Discharge by performance, fulfill their obligations within the time and the manner prescribed. So when the obligations are fulfilled, both A and B come into contract, A also accepts, B also accepts. So within time, in the prescribed mode, the contract comes to an end, right? This we call it as discharge by performance. Discharge by mutual agreement. Parties agree to substitute a new contract or refund or alter it. So somewhere they think, right? So something is missing, or two persons will be there, or any third person will come into the contract and they may like, right? So 2 to 3%. Anything, any modifications, right? So or it gives rise to new contract. We call it as a mutual agreement. So which tells participants, kindly mute your audio. So substitute new contract or refund or alter it. And the third one is discharge by impossibility of performance. So some way from the beginning itself, ab initio, which means the very start, the contract is not to be performed due to various reasons. The impossibility may exist from the very start. So that's what I have given as ab initio. So so many things we can tell like that. From the beginning itself, we know that it is not going to happen. So that is impossibility of performance. Discharge by lapse of time. A contract must be performed within a specific period according to the Limitation Act 1963. If not performed, it becomes lapsed. So discharge by operation of law due to death or insolvency. So automatically the court enters into the scene and automatically it is discharged by court of law. The last one is discharge by breach of contract, which means if one of the parties to a contract breaks the promise. So there are differences, right? So each and every term differs in their own meaning. When A and B comes into contract and at the final stage, somebody breaks the promise, right? That we call it as breach of contract. So moving to the next slide. Breach means failure of a party to perform his or her obligation under a contract. It may arise in two ways: anticipatory breach and actual breach. So anticipatory breach. An anticipatory breach, again, anticipatory and actual, it is asked for multiple choice. An anticipatory breach of contract is a breach of contract occurring before the time fixed for performance has arrived. So before the contract itself, the contract comes to an end, before the particular time, particular date, right? So they may be fixing a date, but before that, both the parties did not agree. So anticipatory breach. So it may be written in words, it may take any form, or impliedly conduct. By talking itself, they'll put an end to the contract, implied. Actual breach is if suppose on that particular date, not before, but if on that particular date, two parties fail to perform their contract, we call it as actual breach. I have given an example, as for example, where on the appointed day, the seller does not deliver the goods or the buyer refuses to accept the delivery. Both the things will result in actual breach. So the final day has come, the seller has not yet delivered, the buyer is in damn need, right? So very much needed for the product, so the seller fails. The seller delivers his product, the buyer is not ready to accept. So on that particular date, it occurs. Next is what I have given some remedies. Again, recession, quantum mirror, these what I have given in bold letters, right? So these are all the MCQs question. Whenever there is a breach of a contract, the injured party becomes entitled to any one or more of the remedies. First one is rescission of the contract. So which means which person is affected, right, with the breach of contract, that person can go for cancellation. No, you cancel the contract, so I think you will not perform it well, right? So I feel the bad, right? So with the contract you are not ready to supply, so let me cancel my contract. So rescission is nothing but cancellation, right? Sued for damages. If through this contract the either party, right, either one of the person has suffered some damages, he can make suit of it. The third one is suit upon quantum merit. So quantum merit is as much as he deserved. Who? As much as he deserved is nothing but which party is being suffered due to the loss, right? So whatever loss is being suffered, whatever he deserves, he can make a suit. The exact word of quantum merit is as much as he deserved. The other person has to compensate. Suit for specific performance of the contract. So this specific performance I asked, this person has failed. So whatever the loss, it has to give. And suit for an injunction. Automatically injunction is a law term. So the through court of law, if they put their end or ask for remedies through court of law, so that we call it as suit for an injunction. The last two things are being covered with Specific Relief Act 1963. So next we'll go to quasi contracts. The quasi contracts. What do you mean by quasi contracts? Always the definition is being given, and certain types, so many types of contracts are named in the option. You have to identify. So when we want to discuss about quasi contracts, it's very simple. The exact meaning I have given for simply to understand. No two parties come together, no relationship, no contract, no agreement. So you can see in the second line, there is no offer, no acceptance, no consensus at item, and in fact no intention on the part of parties to enter into a contract, but due to some situation they come into a contract. For example, simply if you go on a road, right, you find a purse. So inside it somebody has missed it, inside it the visiting card is there, and you call the person, right? So you have to hand it over to him. So that we call it as quasi contracts. So no offer, no acceptance, nothing is between the two parties, right? So that we call it as quasi contracts. So it will come, right? So what is the duty of the finder of goods, right? So likewise we'll see. So here I have given such obligations. The first paragraph gives you the meaning what I have explained now. Such obligations imposed by law are referred to as quasi contracts, or the other name, very important, constructive contracts under the English law, right? So English law, once they asked, and the other name for quasi contracts, right? Everything you have to understand, right? So when you remember all these things, you will be able to answer it, right? So when you see a particular aspect, so you think widely. So quasi contract means this is the meaning. So these persons are coming in, these terms are there. So likewise you should get, right? Quasi and certain relations resembling those created by contracts under the Indian law. The term quasi contract has been used because such a contract resembles with a contract so far as result or effect is concerned, but it has little or no affinity, right? No relationship with the persons. The last thing, 3 lines are very important. So on which doctrine the quasi contracts works, right? A quasi or constructive contract rests upon the equitable, which means the principle, doctrine of unjust enrichment, which says that, what is the doctrine name? Doctrine of unjust enrichment, which says that a person shall not be allowed to enrich himself unjustly at the expense of others. So when in my example, if the person finds the purse, no, we have told an example. If he keeps himself, right, so he shouldn't keep himself, he should take appropriate steps to hand it over to the appropriate person, right? So that's what, a person shall not be allowed to enrich himself unjustly at the expense of others. So this is called as quasi contracts. So let us move on to Sale of Goods Act 1933. 1930. So transactions in the nature of sale of goods, any transactions which involves the nature of sale of goods form the subject matter of the Sale of Goods Act 1930. The act came into force on 1st July 1930. The following essentials of the contract emerge as a result of Sale of Goods Act. So which tells that there must be at least two parties, transfer or agreement to transfer the ownership of goods. The subject matter of the contract must necessarily be goods. Price is the consideration of the contract of sale, and all other essentials. What we saw in second or third slide, right? Proper offer, proper acceptance, no illegal contract, like all the essentials of a valid contract as per Indian Contract Act must be present. So it tells goods and their classification. Sale of Goods Act mentions so many types of goods. So goods means why specific importance is given to goods. Sale of Goods Act, first line I have told you, transactions in the nature of sale of goods form the subject matter. So obviously we have to see the various types of goods, and always you can expect at least one question from the various types of goods, right? Previously they asked contingent goods, and once unascertained, likewise, right? So we'll see with examples. Goods means every kind of movable property other than actionable claims and money, and includes stocks, shares, growing crops, grass, and things attached to or forming part of the land which are agreed to be served before sale or under the contract of sale. So goods may be classified as, what are the types? Existing, future, contingent. What are existing goods? Existing goods are those which are owned or possessed by the seller at the time of contract. So you go to a shop, right? You ask for a pen, so the seller sells the pen. You got the pen by paying the money, right? So it's readily available with the seller. Those are existing goods. So specific or existing goods may be either divided, right? So it is divided into two types: specific or ascertained, generic or unascertained. So in specific goods, specific goods means goods identified and agreed upon at the time of a contract is made. So ascertained goods also, it includes goods which have become ascertained subsequently to the formation of the contract. If you buy a pen, it becomes a specific goods, and if you ask for a particular brand and it is not available, and he tells tomorrow you come, I'll give you the pen. So ascertained goods. So here comes generic or unascertained goods, which tells you that, just a minute. So generic or unascertained goods. These are goods indicated by description and not specifically identified. For example, if you go to buy some 10 chairs or 20 chairs, right, in a showroom. In a showroom, obviously, you will be having so many items, right? If suppose the manufacturer has 500 to 1000 chairs of the same model you have ordered, what he will say, okay, sir, I will send you the number what you require, 10 chairs. We don't know which 10 chairs will be supplied out of that 1000 chairs. We call it as generic or unascertained goods. Future goods means goods to be manufactured or produced or acquired by the seller after making the contract of sale. So for this we can tell, the best example is if suppose A agrees B, right? So he agrees B to give milk for 1 month, right? So whatever this cow gives, so I will supply you for the whole month. We don't know how much the cow gives, right? So future goods. So agreement is the contract of sale has been put in. So whatever the cow gives, he has to accept. So getting milk is future, right? So day by day we have to get it. We cannot predict it in one day. And the third one is contingent goods. The acquisition of which by the seller depends upon a contingency which may or may not happen. Contingent goods is a part of future goods. Why? So future goods also no guarantee, right? So how much we are going to get it. The best example you can quote for contingent goods is if A asks something to B, right? So some goods which are to being shipped. So B tells that, sir, okay, so if the ship arrives at proper time, I will be able to deliver you what you require, right? So dear participants, understand the meaning. The ship may or may not arrive. You all know what are all the hindrances in sea. So, right, so we have so many obstacles, right? So if any problem occurs, the ship won't arrive. So on happening of an event, if it is done, it is called as contingent goods. So next comes conditions and warranties. So when we purchase, right? So when you purchase a product, automatically we ask for warranty. So warranty, is there a warranty or is there a guarantee for how many years, right? Free service, etc., etc. So what do you mean by that? So there is difference between conditions and warranties. In a contract of sale, there are certain stipulations, right? Rules regarding what? Quality. Again, here the thing I have given in bold letters are the multiple choice question options regarding the quality of the goods, price, payment, delivery, time and place. So if we are all customers, right? So we will look into all these aspects, shall we? Right? So quality, price, payment, delivery, time and place. All stipulations cannot be treated on the same footing. So all the things you can't treat it as same. Some may be intended by the parties to be of a fundamental nature, which means quality is very, very important, and breach of quality will be regarded as a breach of contract. If A asks for a particular quality and B supplies another quality, there is every right for A to end the contract. This is one meaning, right? And coming to the next. Now, the next thing. Some may be intended by the parties to be binding, but of a subsidiary or inferior character. Do remember, these are not essentials. For example, time of payment, right? So we need not give much importance. So whenever we go and purchase time. So that a breach of these, if A tells, okay, I'll pay it in afternoon. So little time he takes, right? So he comes in the evening. We can't end the contract, right? So these are all inferior character. So that a breach of these terms will not put an end to the contract, but will make the party committing the breach liable to damages, if suppose any damages occur. So that is a thing, but the contract will not come. So participants, the first thing what I have explained, so is called the condition, and the second one are the warranties, right? So the former stipulations are called conditions and the later warranties. So next we'll enter into contract of indemnity, a contract by which one party promises to save the other from loss caused to him by the conduct of the promiser himself or by the conduct of any other person is called a contract of indemnity. The section is to be noted, the definition is to be noted for your multiple choice question, and what are all the rights, etc. So save from other person's loss, right? So contract, one person promises the other person to save him from the loss. So insurance policies, you can tell us best example. So what are the rights of indemnity holder when sued? This rights of indemnity holder comes under section 125. He is entitled to recover all damages. He is entitled to recover all costs reasonably incurred. He is also entitled to recovery all sums which he may have been paid under the term of any compromise of any such suit, right? So if suppose problem occurs, there are so many issues still going on between an insurance company and the insurer, right? So what are all the rights? Next comes contract of guarantee. A contract of guarantee is a contract to perform the promise or discharge the liability of a third person in case of his default, right? So we all come across so many things in our day-to-day life, right? So when a loan is being given, so they ask for a guarantor, right? So they ask for a surety, right? The person who gives the guarantee is called the surety. The person in respect of whose default the guarantee is given is called the principal debtor, and the person to whom the guarantee is given is called the creditor. So these three persons comes inside the contract of guarantee. A guarantee may be either oral or written. A contract of guarantee, like every other contract, must also satisfy all the essential elements of a valid contract. So example I've given: genuine consent, legality, competency, and must be supported by some consideration. So next we'll go to bailment and pledge. So according to section 148 of the Contract Act, a bailment is the delivery of goods by one person to another for some purpose upon a contract that they shall, when the purpose is accomplished, be returned or otherwise disposed of according to the directions of the person delivering them. So this is the definition. So when you see this definition, you have to choose the option. So who are all the parties involved? The bailer and the bailee. The person delivering the goods is called the bailer. The person to whom they are delivered is called the bailee, and the transaction is called the bailment. So what are all the essential features? It is a delivery of movable goods by one person to another person. Compulsory, it must be present. The goods are delivered for some purpose. The goods are delivered subject to the condition that when the purpose is accomplished, the goods are to be returned. So this makes a difference, right, between bailment, pledge, and so on. So under bailment, after the purpose is over, the goods are to be returned. Next comes the kinds of bailment. There are two types, right? So kinds of bailment from benefit point of view and reward point of view. So from benefit point of view, bailment for the exclusive benefit of the bailer. Example, bailer leaves goods in the safe custody of the bailee without any compensation to be paid, right? So bailment for the exclusive benefit. Again, an example, a loan of some article. Thus, when A borrows B's fountain pen to use in the examination hall, the bailment is for the sole benefit of A, right? So some benefit, right? So on this purpose of benefit, we have to view the bailment. And from reward point of view, there are two types: gratuitous bailment and non-gratuitous bailment. So gratuitous bailment, it is one in which neither the bailer nor the bailee is entitled to any remuneration. Suppose if A lends a book to his friend, right? So nothing is obtained by two of them, right? So after reading a book, he is again going to return to his friend. Depositing of goods for safe custody without any charge. So do remember, so don't confuse. So without any charge. Charge, if it comes, we come to non-gratuitous. So something, so if you are going for a tour, right? So 2 to 3 days, you tell somebody your relations to keep the articles, right, which you want to safeguard. So after returning from it, you are going to get it, right? So gratuitous bailment. And non-gratuitous bailment, it is called bailment for reward. Here, either the bailer or the bailee is entitled to a remuneration. For example, motor car let out for hire, so you have to pay for it. And if cloth given for tailoring, for charges. So when you approach a tailor for stitching your clothes, you can't get without paying him or her, right? So for if you want to take delivery of your clothes, you have to pay. So next comes finder of lost goods. So in quasi contracts, right? So I would have told you about the lost purse, right? So the person who finds it is called the finder. Duties of finder: duty to find the true owner, duty to take reasonable care of the goods. Rights of a finder: what about the rights? So if the true owner is not approaching yet, right? So he has the right to retain possession of the goods until the true owner is found. Right of lien over the goods for expenses. If something in some or the other way he makes some expenses, right, to maintain it, so he can possess that goods till those expenses are paid by the true owner. So which section it comes, right? So right to sue, you have to note it. So right to sue, reward. So both the things under section 168. And right of sale. So he keeps it for a long time. So nothing is coming on the part of the true owner. So nobody claims that product. So he has the right to sale if needed, right? So next comes the pledge, the bailment of goods as security for payment of a debt or performance of a promise is called pledge. So you must remember all the persons, right? So the persons involved in bailment, the persons previously what we saw, and here the pledger, pledgee, all these things are asked in multiple choice questions, right? The person who delivers the goods as security is called the pledger, and the person to whom the goods are so delivered is called the pledgee. The ownership remains with the pledger. In case the pledger fails to pay his debt, right, or complete the performance, he fails to complete the performance of obligation at the stipulated time, the pledgee may sell the goods pledged on, giving the pledger a reasonable notice of sale. So we come across a very common term, the pledges, right? So however, the sale made by the pledgee without giving a reasonable notice to the pledger is not void, that is, cannot be set aside. The pledgee will be liable to the pledger for the damages. So, but to be safer, the he has to give a notice, right? So to the pledger. So next comes contracts of agency, definition of agent and principal. Again, a very important one in under the legal aspects of business, because everywhere we can see agencies, franchise, right, etc. An agent is a person to do any for another or to represent another in dealings with third persons. The person for whom such act is done or who is represented is called the principal. Who does the work is called the agent, on whom the work is done is called the principal. We have so many kinds of agents: general agent, special agent, universal agent, and it continues. So general agent, so I have given the meaning, he has very broad range of transactions, right? So a big business will be having so many agents, right? So a broader range of transactions on behalf of principal, if he does, he calls that, he is called as general agent. And the special agent, to act specifically, right? Unless the principal asks him to act, he cannot do so. So if he gives, the principal gives authorization, okay, you go and do this, you instead of me, you attend this meeting, so something else like that. So if he gives authorization alone, he can act specifically. And next comes universal agent, authorized to perform all acts or duties on behalf of the principal. Here the principal itself will forget that he is a principal, so on behalf of the principal everything will be performed, all the responsibilities, not like general transactions. Here he perform all the duties and acts on behalf of the principal. So here next comes commission agent, who acts for the purpose of getting commission. Del creditor agent, so agent acts as a guarantor of credit extended to the buyer. So he accepts the credit also, right, on behalf of the principal. So if principal gets some loan, so on behalf of him, if he is liable, the agent is also liable. We call it as del creditor agent. And agency by express agreement, return agreement, or by act, we call it as implied agreement. And agency by estoppel, induced others to believe that he is agent of a particular person. If, for example, to explain agency by estoppel, right, three persons are there, right? A, B, and C. Three persons are there, and A asks B that I will supply this much of goods or something is going to enter on behalf of C, right? So C tells nothing, so he remains idle. So which means that B can act on behalf of him, right? So there the party A doesn't know who is the principal and who is the agent, right? So he thinks that B is the agent, but B alone knows C is the principal. So induced. So nothing is coming on the part of the principal. He remains silent, which makes the other person that to believe some other person as principal. So that we call it as agency by estoppel. So how the agency terminates, right, comes to an end. So it comes under two ways: by the act of the parties and by operation of law. What if we talk about act of the party? So obviously through agreement, if they terminate, right? So A agree, B agree, so they discuss, let us terminate our agency, right, due to various reasons. Revocation by the principal. So he revocates, getting back, right? So if the principal gets back from the agreement, so we call it as revocation. And 203 is agreement and 207 is revocation. termination by operation of law, completion of the business. So these are all the points whereby it automatically comes under end, to an end by operation of law. Completion of the business, expiry of time, death of the principal or the agent, insanity of the principal or the agent, insolvency of the principal, destruction of the subject matter, dissolution of a company, principal or agent becomes alien enemy. So all these points you have to remember. So they may ask, right? So operation of law, act of the parties, and so on. Next, we'll pass on to Information Technology Act 2000. So the term information technology is generally applied to broad area of activities and technologies associated with the use of computers and communication. Cyber law is the law relating to communications and automatic control systems. Thus, cyber law covers what are all the things covered, right? Information Technology Act is nothing but the Cyber Law Act, everything a Cyber Law Act. So whereby all the technologies has to be governed. So we experience today a lot of issues, right? So in social medias, in our computers, right? So many things we expect. We are facing problems, right? So the cyber law covers IT law, which regulates information technology law, which regulates transactions relating to computers and the internet, communication law, which regulates telecommunications and broadcasting, including radio, television, telephony, and cable. It is covered by, so these things, right, are covered by, whereby telecommunications, radio, television, etc. Indian Telegraphic Act 1885, the Wireless Telegraphy Act 1993, the Cable Television Network Regulation Act 1995. So why I have given here is mostly we people forget, right? The students forget to know these acts and their year, right? So in MCQs, they may ask the year of enactment of act, in which year the Indian Telegraphic Act, in year, which year wireless, or whereby the communication law consists of, right? They may give the options. And cyber law, everything relating to computers and communication. So I have given Information Technology Act was enacted on 17th October 2000. It is the first cyber law in India, and India became the 12th nation in the world to adopt cyber laws by passing the act, right? So it is mainly based on the model law on e-commerce. Again, it is a very important multiple choice question. IT Act, to which it relates, what are all the acts it is being covered, we saw in the before slide. When it was introduced, which rank was given to India when introducing the cyber law, which is the first cyber law, right? So these much questions we have. All these questions apart, set aside, right? So the important thing always you have to know is on which model law it is based. It is based on UNCITRAL, right? Which means which is governed by United Nations Commissions on International Trade Law of United Organizations. So model law on e-commerce. So this is very, very important aspect for your multiple choice question. You know the expansion, right? So they may give UNCITREL, UNCETROL, likewise. So options will be there, right? So you please by heart the explanation, right? Abbreviation, right? Next comes who is going to control the cyber law? Cyber Appellate Tribunal, CAT, right? So it was started functioning from October 2006, initially known as Cyber Regulations Appellate Tribunal, CRAT, and it was modified to CAT. Seeks to resolve disputes rising from this law. Presiding officer, PO, right? So presiding officer appointed by central government. So here I have given just why cyber crimes, right? So we people face lot of problems through WhatsApp, whatever, maybe Facebook, Twitter. Every day it is being increasing, right? So why? The advancement of technology has made man dependent on internet, right? Internet has given man easy access to everything by sitting in one place. A few years back, there was lack of awareness about the crimes, but not so nowadays, right? So dear participants, so we all, and that too in this corona holidays, right? So many things are coming in WhatsApp about any information, right? So lots of things they it is coming, and the officials are telling, please don't believe this, don't believe that, right? So unless it comes official, you can't believe. So that's what I have given, where the rate of incidents is also increasing day by day. So with the development of internet, it has developed concept of cybercrime. So this gives you the very important kinds of cyber crimes, right? They may ask the terms, they may give the meaning, and they may ask the terms. So you know the exact meaning. So hacking, it is unauthorized access, right? Web hijacking, unwanted alteration of the browser. So automatically the browser gets changed, right? So that is the meaning of hijacking. And child pornography, which exploits children. It is an sexual abusement, right? And cyber stalking, sending threatening emails, right? So some people will receive email, right? So threatening them. So that is called as cyber stalking. And DOS attack. So it's obviously it slows down a website, right? So sometimes we tell to our friends, hey, that's not opening at all. So many times I have tried. How could you open, right? So somewhere lies the mistake. DOS attack, denial of service attack. You are not able to get that service, right? So something is happening. Virus attack. So never it doesn't mean that always DOS attack is there. Due to our net facility also, it may slow, but you can identify, right? Virus attacks which modify the programs, so like virus alone. Software piracy, illegal copying or use of software. Salami attacks, which means small attacks add up to a major attack. So one single attack will result in huge, everything will go off, right? They will start with small, that doesn't reveal to the customer, right? So they will start a small attack and it will go to a major thing. So that we call it a salami attack. And next one, phishing. So you can see in the pic, right? So one man is putting, and how we catch the fish, right? So he takes all the data, right? So the person is a thief, and you can see the pic. He takes all the data from the particular person's computer. So that is called as phishing. Only thing, the spelling changes, right? So more or less he takes all the data, right? Sale of illegal articles, I have given the elephant tusk, right? So anything like that. Today if you browse for pistols, right, so many pistols are being sold in online, right? So illegal articles, one example I have given, elephant tusk. Online gambling, you can see in the pic, right? So email spoofing, forgery. So forging something, right? Somebody to do a particular thing. So email spoofing. Cyber defamation. So it creates lot of damage to reputation of a person. So very important one. So that person will be very successful. Just a minute. So that person will be of very high official, actress or something else, right? So it creates lot of damages to the reputation of a person. So that we call it as cyber defamation. Theft of information contained in electronic form. So email bombing, which means large volumes of emails are sent so that your system gets hanged. So these are very important terms to be understood under the category cyber crimes. So next we'll pass on to intellectual property rights. So frequent, at least some 2 to 3 questions are being asked in intellectual property. So when you revise, right? So if you take a topic, so you have to revise everything, right? So the intellectual property means when it was implemented. So what are all the things coming under that? So what are all the fees it is to be paid, how long it is going to extend. So if you be thorough, and 10 minutes work on update, right? So update on intellectual property, what are the recent trends in intellectual. So this is the way you have to study any subject, right? So if you take any topic, so I would tell you to study the textbooks, right, rather than the books selling for exclusively for this. If you have this marketing, if you have this business, if you want to study financial management, if you want to study income tax, you take particular textbooks. It will be very, very benefit if you use this as a tip, right? So so I wanted to tell yesterday itself, I forgot, so it will be best. So whenever I want to tell, right, so without wasting our time, I will inform you. So intellectual property is a property that arises from the human intellect. It is a product of human creation. Intellectual property comprises two distinct forms, literary and artistic, industrial property. So here, literary and artistic works, they are books, paintings, musical compositions, plays, movies, radio, TV programs, performances, and other artistic works. How they are protected? Protected by copyright. So you have to understand in IPRs, right? Intellectual property rights consist of copyright, trademarks, patents, right? So major types of intellectual property. Three categories I have given: functional and technical, purely artistic works, and what about the symbol, logo, and which law governs all these things. So here you can see Patent Act 1970, which was amended in 1999 and 2005. So dear participants, I have told you each and every slide is a multiple choice question, right? So once we got a question in which year Patent Act was amended, so I included, I thought of including that in the same thing, right? So 1999 and 2005 likewise, right? So purely artistic works, Copyright Act 1957, which was amended in 5 years, right? 1982, 84, 92, 94, and 99. And what about which law governs symbol, logo, word, sound, etc.? Trademark Act 1999 and amended in 94, 96, and 2000. So here comes the patents. It is covered under the act called the Patents Act 1970, amended by 2005 Act. It extends to the whole of India. It shall come into force on such date as the central government may publish by notification in the official gazette. So if you want to, I will give a tip here, right? So if you want to remember all these things, you kindly visit the particular websites, right? So patent, we have official sites, so easily you may remember. So which year and what, immediately it comes into your mind, right? So when you get into the particular websites, you get amazing informations, right? When you adapt the textbook and plus the website thing, right? Website visiting of websites, it will be helpful. It will do a great job, right? So visit the websites of that particular terms. So next one, a patent describes an invention for which the inventor claims the exclusive right. So this line they once asked in multiple choice question, inventor claims the exclusive right. Who claims the exclusive right? They gave so many options and one of the option for inventor. It may be a simple question, right? So very simple only, but at that time you have to think. They will give the other three words which resembles inventor itself, right? So that is the tags they use, right? And mostly all of us, please, when you read the question, right? So don't fix the options. So, oh, for this question, I read only these options. Oh my God, the options are not there. So don't fix the options. The only thing is you will be having the options correctly, but the words are put the other way, right? So for the same option. So don't fix the options. You just read the question, read it once, right? So twice, and then look into the option. Think nicely, right? So think. So nothing should come in your mind. So what about this? What about the options? Which will match my option, right? So which of the word matches my option? Surely it will be correct, right? So patents, a patent describes an invention for which the inventor claims. So invention, patentable. What are all the inventions which can be patentable? Novel, right? So new. So novel coronavirus, right? So new coronavirus. So new thing, it must be useful, not obvious, which means a vague thing, right? A confusing thing. Not definite. Indefinite thing cannot be patent. So it must be definite. It must be clear, right? Pertains to patentable subject matter. So these are all the things you can patent. And next comes trademark, a symbol, logo, word, sound, color, design, anything, right? That is used to identify a business or a product in commerce. Different symbols. TM means trademark, SM means service mark. Service mark is very famous in United States of America, right? USA. So they give, likewise for products, if they give, we call it as trademark. If they give for a particular service, the bus service, right? The haircut saloons, so service industry, right? So SM, intent to use application filed for services. So we learn more. So it is covered. Under which act it is covered? Trademarks Act 1999. The act came into effect on September 15th, 2003. It replaced, which act it replaced, right? So this is one of the question, the date of effect, and when it shall come into existence, right? So it extends to whole of India. It shall come into force. This is what I want to tell. It shall come into force on such date as the central government may publish by notification in the official gazette. So when you apply for a patent, trademark or something, lot of procedures are there. Forms you have to fill, you have to pay the fees, you have to upload your documents, you have to summarize, right? So what kind of thing it must be, it must not be resembling anybody's, all these things. So everything is accepted. Official gazette when they upload it, so yours is ready, right? So this is what the meaning. And duration and fees of trademark, very important for multiple choice questions. It is valid for 10 years, and for every 10 years you have to renew, right? So service mark, it's quite different. So previously, even for service mark, it was 10 years, but now 17 years, and it can also be renewed every 17 years. The government fees, service mark, it's not popular here. The government fees is rupees 2,500 for each class of goods or services. So then comes to copyright. The Indian Copyright Act 1957 governs the system of copyrights in India. Amended. What are all the years the copyright was amended? This was asked once, right? And in another question paper, in which year the Copyright Act was implemented, 1957, etc. It is a right which grants protection to the unique expression of ideas. What is covered by copyright? So here I have given you the pictures, so that you can remember, right? So these that is the motive of mine. So when you think of these pics, you may derive some meaning, right? So it will be easy for you people to identify. So literary, films, dramatic, musical, artistic, and sound recording. So duration of copyright. So author's lifetime plus 50 years, right? So till author's lifetime, it is his copyright. And after him, 50 years from the end of the calendar year, December 31st, right? In which the author dies. 50 years for films and sound recordings. 25 years for typographical arrangements of a published edition. Typographical arrangements are nothing but the printed manner, we can tell as example, the printing, right? So the style of writing, the style of printing, any arrangements he has made, the typographical of a published edition. You can see the variations in different books, right? Copyright protection always expires on December 31st of the last calendar year of protection, and they can go for a renew. So next comes a very important act which plays a vital role nowadays. So RTI Act 2005, again a multiple choice question portions. The RTI bill was introduced in the Lok Sabha in December 2004. Each line plays a multiple choice question, right? So it was passed by both the houses of the parliament. The assent of the president was received on 15th June and the gazette 21st June. The RTI has been operational. So that only I have given 12th October 2005, even though so many dates will confuse you, right? So no other way, we have to thorough it, right? So from 12th October 2005, after completion of 120 days, it has come into existence. RTI logo after the presidential assent, right? So it has come into existence. RTI logo I have given in the right side, right to information, a very simple and iconic logo, a sheet of paper with information on it, and the authority figure. The logo can also be related to I, which means information. The bright blue color stands for transparency and purity, free from malpractices of process. So nothing should be hidden. You all know about RTA Act, right? So any problem we come across or anything else we wanted to know, so how this department works, how that department works, so anything you can ask, so that they have given no information must be hidden. Transparency and purity is to be followed. Next comes salient features of the act: maximum disclosures, duty to publish, so everything is published, you can get in their website. Duty to furnish, so whenever asked, they have to furnish the details. And RTI means the PIOs, right? So they both are connected. So who is appointed means public information officer takes care of all your queries. Penalty for defiance, disobedience, which means disobedience. Independent and non-judicial appellate mechanism, it is an independent and non-judicial, and mainly came into existence for empowerment of citizens. So what is the role of PIOs, public information officers? Under the RTA Act, PIOs should be designated in all administrative units of every public authority. The RTA Act requires that every public authority shall designate assistant public information officers. PIO is one term, APIOs is another term, right? Assistant public information officers. Under the Act, every APIO has the duty and responsibility to receive information requests from the citizens and forward them to the PIO. So why I have given this is you have to be you have to know these terms, right? So PIO means automatically Right to Information Act must come into mind. So expansion must come into your mind, right? So when it was introduced, what is the purpose? What is the logo? Why the blue color? These are all multiple choice questions. So I denotes what, right? Inform, they may give. Information, they may give. So people get confused. Inform also okay. We people inform. Information also okay. So that is the motto of this session, right? And next comes Competition Act 2002. So to regulate the malpractices, unfair trade practices, the Competition Act 2002 came into existence. The government constituted a high-level committee on competition policy on 15/9/1999 under the chairmanship of SVS Raghavan. So this chairmanship, the name you have to know for your multiple choice question. Then the committee submitted its report, right? And when it came into existence, certain questions, right? The government introduced the competition bill in the parliament. The bill became an act after receiving the assent from the president on 13/1/2003. Private enterprises, but usually we call it as Competition Act 2002, right? So private enterprises as well as government-owned enterprises and even government departments are covered by the provisions of Competition Act 2002. So what is the summarize, right? So easy for you to understand. 14th October 2003 started to support the objectives. It has been the Competition Commission of India, CCI, right? So expansion of CCI. So no law can work on its own, right? So just we saw cyber appellate tribunal, right? So for every law, there will be a commission. So for the competition, you have Competition Commission of India, CCI, established in 14th October 2003 and started to support the objectives, independent authority, and main objective is to promote economic efficiency through competition. So next comes the LLP, Limited Liability Partnership. So it is a very recent terms. I can tell there is still a lot to go about LLPs. There is much little awareness about LLPs. What is the difference between LLPs are nothing but limited liability partnership, right? So what is the difference between partnership and LLPs? So only thing is under their formation, the persons here, there after incorporation, no limitation. There we have limitations, right? So banking business and non-banking business, we have restrictions, and partnership deed is there. Here it's not there. So LLPs, that's what I have given, very simple for you to understand, is a body corporate formed and incorporated under the LLP Act 2008. It is a legal entity which has a separate identity from its partner. LLP is a newly introduced corporate entity which aimed at small and medium-sized business. So very important one. Here you have 2 to 3 questions. Which year? 2008, LLP expansion and a separate legal identity. That is, the partner is not liable, to a certain extent only is liable for the company's loss, right? So that is one of the question. And small and medium sized business. So when certain people want to join immediately without any so many procedures like deed, right? You have to follow certain restrictions, you have to pay fees for a corporation, incorporation, and likewise, right? So small and medium sized business, this is apt. So here I have given nature of LLP. It's a body corporate, legal entity separate from its partners. The company is different from its partners, right? Perpetual succession. Change in partners will not affect existence, rights, or liabilities. So this makes difference between partnership and LLP, right? So Indian Partnership Act 1932 not applicable. So you may get a question whether LLP is governed by Indian Partnership Act 1932. So we people think, so here also partnership, there also partnership. So it may be, it may be so it may be governing, right? So no, not like that. So minimum 2 partners. So here I have given advantages of LLPs. So you can see in the mid pick, right? So 2 to 3 persons joining for LLP. So separate entity, and where a partner is not liable for all losses. The partners of an LLP have the right to manage the business directly. An LLP can raise funds from partners, banks, and NBFCs, non-banking financial. They may raise their capital, right? So if there is only one partner in an LLP, then the sole partner can find a new one without dissolution. If you want to add someone, so you can go, right? So no hard and fast rules. Post incorporation, very important one. An LLP can have limitless partners. If you know all these points, right? So you may able to differentiate between the normal partnership and here. You have limitations, right? Partnership. So here you don't have limitations for joining your partners. So next comes the very important portions. 2 to 3 questions are being asked. Negotiable Instruments Act 1881. So what is Negotiable Instruments Act? So immediately you must get into your mind. So 3 things comes into your mind: promissory note, bills of exchange, and check, right? Here 1881, you have to remember the word negotiable. What does it mean? Transferable by delivery, once they ask for multiple choice question. And the word instrument means a written document by which a right is created in favor of some person. Thus the term negotiable instrument literally means a written document transferable by delivery. So here in future slides we are going to see promissory note, bill of exchange, and check. So this section is to be remembered. So section 4 deals with promissory note. So containing an unconditional undertaking signed by the maker. It's not a bank note or currency whereby conditions will be there, right? So by the maker to pay a certain sum of money to or to the order of certain person. If you mostly we people might have seen the promissory note, right? In the banking books. So promissory note will be there. I promise here, I hereby promise to pay B, right? So 2000. So within a certain limit, right? So that is called the promissory note. It must be in writing. It must contain a promise. The word promise must be there, right? So participants do remember promise. If the word promise is there only, it becomes as a promissory note, right? Otherwise it becomes as a bill of exchange, right? So no, the word promise is not there. The promise to pay must be unconditional. So no conditions must be there, right? That is, some may get doubt, right? So if you want to pay in a particular date, it is a condition only, you may think like that. But unconditional means other than that, no conditions must be included in the promissory note. That is, if you give only this product, I will pay this on that particular date, I will pay this much of money. So if you agree this only, I will give this. So no such conditions, right? So that is called as unconditional. And it must be signed by the maker. The maker must be a certain person, the person who prepares, right? So the maker, the payee must be certain. Next comes check. So a sample check I have given. just right, a simple reference. A check is a bill of exchange drawn on a specific banker and not expressed to be payable otherwise than on demand, right? So, and it includes the electronic image of a truncated check and a check in the electronic form. So many things we go. So as I have told you, right? So take a check, right? So anything, if you want to go through, right? So anything you have to pass. If you want to pass an interview, if you want to pass an exam, so practically you see, right? So only thing difficulties, we need some time. It will take some time, right? So when you see a check, right? So what is this? What is that? So in down, what I have given, what is the expansion of MICR? So under which section the check comes, under which law it comes. So how many numbers are there, right? So likewise, you have to study whose sign will be there, right? So it will be very easy for you, right? So to attend the questions. So we come here to GST. So negotiable instruments, check, bill of exchange, and promissory note, right? So GST, goods and services tax. It is an indirect tax which was introduced in India on 1st July 2017, and was the date is very important. The expansion is important, one of the multiple choice question, and whether it is direct or indirect, right? So we all know. So when a customer directly pays everything, the IT income tax, what we pay is come as direct tax, and indirect tax, somebody's things we are going to pay, right? So and was applicable throughout India, which replaced multiple cascading taxes levied by the central and state governments. It was introduced as the Constitution. Which Constitution? 101st Amendment. 101st Amendment, that is to be remembered, following the 122nd Amendment Bill. So it was followed, but it was passed in the Constitution as 101, right? The GST is governed by the GST Council and its chairman. So here you have to know the percentages, right? So GST is a topic we have to take at least for 1 week, right? So it goes, everything is very vast, but for your reference, so what is the percentage, what is the expansion, what is the exact thing, when it came into existence, what are all the terms inside it, right? So I have given here. So 0% is also there, 5%, 12, 18, and 28. It follows like this. There is a special rate of 0.25% on rough precious and semi-precious stones and 3% on gold. In addition, a cess of 22% or other rates on top of 28% GST applies on few items like aerated drinks, luxury cars, and tobacco products. So participants, so it's very difficult to give all the products, right? So which product, which rate. So better, I will give you a suggestion. So when you take printout, right? So the products and the percentages, right? So it will be easy for you. You visit the GST website, so amazing details you may get. So very easy, right? So you may incorporate it, right, very quickly. So like luxury cars and tobacco products, GST replaced a slew of indirect taxes with a unified tax, and is therefore set to dramatically reshape the country's $2 trillion economy. So here I have given history of GST, introduced by Vajpayee government in 2000. Union budget 2006-7 announced application of GST. Bill passed in Lok Sabha on 6th May 2015. Bill passed in Rajya Sabha on 3rd August 2016, and GST to be implemented by July 2017. So here I have given certain expansions, right? So GST means all of us know, come to know what are all these terms, right? So nowadays the higher education.
Madam, could you previous slide, madam?
Yes, sir. So here I have given the history of GST. So introduced by the yes, sir, no problem, sir. Introduced by Vajpayee government in 2000. Union budget, so 2006 announced its application, right? So they had an idea, right? 1st April 2010. The bill was passed in Lok Sabha, right, on 6th May 2015. and it was passed in Rajya Sabha on 3rd August 2016, and it was implemented in July 2017. Why I gave these steps, right? So some you may think if this much of deep they will they ask? Yes. So they may give the steps, right? So they may jumble the steps and give, right? So only thing you can identify with the help of here, but you must know the Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha may confuse you, right? So for that, shall I move, sir?
Yes, madam. Yes, madam.
Yes, ma'am. Proceed, ma'am. Proceed.
Yes. So here CGST central, right? So it stands for central GST, and SGST state GST, and UT union territory, and integrated GST. So CGST is a central. This is applicable on supplies within the state. So this slide itself, you may get at least 1 to 2 questions. So within the state means which, right? So this is applicable, which is applicable, what is the expansion, and so on. So here under CGST, the tax collected will be shared to central government, right? So SGST, tax collected will be shared to state, and union territory will be shared with union territory, and integrated GST, this is applicable on interstate when it goes from state to state and import transactions. Tax collected is shared between center and state. So you know the expansion. So if you know the meaning, right? So who all shares, right? So that is enough, right, for the MCQs. So here it would be a great mistake, right? So if we don't discuss ITC, input tax credit, when discussing GST. So input tax credit means at the time of paying tax on output, you can reduce the tax you have already paid on inputs. So for example, this is the exact meaning. So for example, if you are a manufacturer, so I have given in the slide itself, tax payable, something you have to pay for output, final product 450. So, but for that product already you have paid. This is called the GSTs mainly avoids the cascading effect, right? So you need not pay both, right? So 450 tax paid on input, already when purchasing he has paid tax of rupees 300. So now what is the difference, right? So you can claim input credit, ITC of 300, and you only need to deposit 150 in taxes, 450 minus 300. So that is the great advantage of GST cascading effect in ITC, input tax credit. So here I have given GSTN, Goods and Services Tax Network. So everybody, every business, right? So which is going to pay, which is paying GST, they might be knowing this. So this network, you have to get inside, you have to pay, right? So there are frequent steps to follow. So this was set up by the government as private company under Section 25 of the Companies Act. So please do note this point. So GSTN, what is the role? It takes care of all these things, right? Registration, returns, challans, interstate goods, refunds, audits, appeals, etc. So this is the work of Goods and Services Tax Network. So when you get into that website, so how you could register. So what are all the procedures? So lots of things are there, right? So to summarize, to immediately come into your mind, right? So GSTN means you have to know the expansion. So which act it comes, I have given this thing. And what about GST Council? So it is a joint forum of the center and state, will function under the chairmanship of Union Finance Minister, who is the head. They may ask for a question. So Union Finance Minister, and will have ministers nominated by states and UTs, Union Territories. The council will act as a benchmark and will guide the states and union on issues like tax rates, exemption list, threshold limits, etc. The central government shall have a weightage of 1/3 of the total votes cast. The votes of all state governments taken together shall have a weightage of 2/3 of the total votes cast. So central 1/3. So total of all the state governments 2/3, right? So to be the chairmanship, right? So who are all the persons eligible? So they have to vote it. So GST Council is these things. You have to remain remind in your mind, right? So keep it in your mind. So what are all the functions? So who will be the chairman? So what will be the portion, right? 2 to 3 questions you can know here. So here I have given advantages of advantages of GST. So eliminates cascading effect. That is what I have told you. No person must pay 2 times, right? So he's reducing whenever the purchase made, and he is going to pay tax on output. He is going to reduce the tax already made on input. Greater limitation towards registration. So very easy, right? So easily you can register. Reduced number of complaints, no complicities, stopping corruption and tax leakages, resourceful administration, ease of doing business, transparency, formation of the common national market, simple and easy online procedure, and composition scheme for small businesses. So though GST is a very, very vast term, right? So very, as academicians, professors, you may know, right? So how vast it goes. But I think, so a little bit of a little drop I have given in a big ocean, right? So with this, I end my session. It's over to Tenmuri ma'am.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Ma'am, there are a few questions. If you don't mind, could we please go into question and answer session, ma'am?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay, so there's the first question by Mrs. Shilpa.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Please explain indemnity with an example, ma'am.
Indemnity.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, sir. The contract of insurance can be told as best example for indemnity. So when you take a policy, right? So somebody's loss is going to be covered by someone, provided they get premium. So that can be told as an example, sir.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
Yes, sir.
The second question is by Priya Jyotirlingam, ma'am.
Okay.
In which of the heads we have to concentrate on legal aspects for UGC NET exam?
The main aspects they are asking, sir. Am I correct?
Yeah, yes, ma'am.
So that's what we have covered today. Everything is very important. But to answer her, a very good question. Indian Contract Act. So we get cyber crimes. So last time, 3 to 4 questions itself arrived in Indian Contract Act. So cyber crimes, GST, and bailment, pledge, and what else? So everything they cover, sir. To summarize, at least 8 to 10 questions you can expect. But we have 10 to 12 laws we have covered today, right? So each thing one if you keep, right? So at least 8 to 10 questions appear, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Question, ma'am, by Tanushri Seal, ma'am.
Okay.
Approximately number of questions covered. How many questions will be covered from this topic, ma'am, for the exam?
That's what, sir. I have told 8 to 10 questions, sir, in legal aspects of business.
Okay, thank you.
So participants, for your reference, I will tell you, if you paper 2 consists of 10 units, right? So from each unit you have to get at least 8 to 10 questions to make it as 100 questions. So if it goes extra 10 or 11 questions, right? So compulsory or surely you can expect from each each subject, right? If you take marketing, you will get 8 questions, or if you take legal aspects, you may get 9 questions, and if you take income tax, again 7 to 8 questions. Likewise, you try to calculate, right?
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Ma'am, there is another question by Assistant Professor Bertie Roy.
Yes, sir.
Is dual GST applicable in India? If yes, give explanation, ma'am.
Sorry, sir. I don't have an idea.
Yeah, no problem, ma'am.
Yes, sir.
Next question is by Sarat Kumar, sir.
Okay.
What are actionable claims? Please let me know with example.
Actionable claims, auctionable or actionable, sir?
Actionable. Action actionable.
So my thing is, my view is, if something is goes wrong, right? So any claims you can do. So for your damages or losses. So according to me, that is the thing, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Then there's another question by Subarani, ma'am.
Yes, sir.
Which is the best book for reference, ma'am, for UGC net set?
Very good question. So that is what I told you. Apart from referring the text, apart from referring the specialist books, right? So selling in the market, sold in the market, it's best to refer the textbooks. So if you want to study, for example, this legal aspects, right? So you take the law book, right? So the mercantile law, company law, entire portion you will cover, right? So with the help of these classes, these type of webinars, you may get a summary. So if marketing management you want to study, you take the Philip Kotler book. So you take each topic, you keep the net syllabus side and the other textbook the other side. So the topic you compare, it will be excellent for you. So only thing, so many books are sold. So according to me, you can get 1 or 2 books for references. So how they have given. For MCQs, you may refer. But for the matter, you please study the textbooks.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
We really thank you for taking your time to answer all the questions, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
I hope we have answered all the questions of the participants, and now we shall go in for the final vote of thanks of today's session. I request Enoch Christuraj to please propose the vote of thanks.
Thank you very much, Joshua. On behalf of Patrician College Management, IQAC Cell and Department of Corporate Secretariat, Shift 2, deemed this a prized opportunity to propose a vote of thanks. I thank Dr. Deepa S. for sharing her knowledge on the topic legal aspects of business. Once again, we thank you for your excellent presentation and patience in answering all questions. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, the team, whole team of Patrician College for giving me such an wonderful participants. So thank you for the opportunity given, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. We are very delighted to have you in our virtual presence, ma'am. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you, dear participants. So any queries, so you can contact me through my mail and WhatsApp. Thank you. Thank you, Tenmari ma'am. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you
so much, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you for whole team, right? So you made just a wonderful session. All these things. Hope so. It will end, right? So like the same way. Thank you.
Well, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, kindly share your WhatsApp number, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Shall I put it in chat box, ma'am?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Sure, ma'am.
We request all participants to please tune in back tomorrow again for another lively session. Thank you all.
Did you get my number, sir, in chat box?
Yeah, yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Shall I leave, sir?
Yeah, ma'am. Thank you
Yes,
very
sir.
much.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Sure, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.